Alrighty, everybody. This is not the web news. That kind of sounded like a web news intro. This is a full, formal. Give me some adjectives. Full, formal, colorful.
What's your obsession with adjectives? Like, I don't understand.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Real people in with adjectives.
Here's the thing. Like, how would you describe our show as a whole? It's sort of like we try to be down to earth and these type of things, but there's not like a quick, snappy way where you're just like, what do you say? The phrase down to earth really quick. It's a down to earth show. You know what I mean? But if you just say like, this is an amazing program. Informative. But that's, I'm not in a suit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Essential. This is an essential show.
Oh man.
Like if you're not listening to this, you are not a developer in the space. So congratulations to everyone that's listening to this. You're an official developer.
We are providing an essential service. That would have worked better during
it's an accreditation. Why can't I say that word?
Accreditate. Oh no.
Oh my God. Oh no. This is a bad start.
I'm going to start typing the word and then showing it on the screen. No, I'm not going to do that. Instead of pronouncing this or learning how to pronounce this word, I'm just going to type it out. But no, this is a full episode, a full fantastic episode, if you will. We're going to be talking about how code reviews are more important than ever. And of course, this is going to lean on some AI stuff. We also are doing something, and I just want the listeners' kind of feedback, because we may not execute this perfectly, but I've been recently listening to some of the Smart Passive Income podcasts with Pat Flynn, and we're not switching to his type of content. But what I noticed just in terms of like general, very high level form is that he sort of, if you're a strategy gamer, he sort of builds tall, not wide. So he kind of like, in my opinion, he kind of like chooses a topic and then he really informs himself and then shares that with us on that topic. And his episodes are very dense. And sometimes I think it's been an hour and a half, and it's been realistically like 35, 40 minutes because the last little bit of his episodes lately have been, sort of ads and sponsors and things. And so we kind of want to maybe try that because we don't want to have like, needless rants and things. So it's just a general idea, and we're trying it for the first time here. If you like it, great. If you think we need to tune it, let us, everything. Any comment, feedback, or anything is much appreciated. We're just kind of tweaking behind the scenes here. But anyway, Mike, please, sir, why don't you, I need to do the rest of the intro. It was a long intro, to be fair.
I haven't even introduced them.
We're not, man. We're going to shorten the episodes. Let's have a longer introduction. Let's skip part of the introduction. No. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a shorter episode. We're just trying to be more informed on like a pinpoint, and then hopefully, get some more feedback and etc. Because you can't research 40 topics for every episode. It's like, man, like what are we doing here? It's ridiculous. But anyway, if all that sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, share this with your friends. And if you want to learn how to code and take some courses and play with their interactive media player code editor, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Scrimba. Go and get up to 20% off their Scrimba Pro plan. You can do so with the link in the show notes and episode description with a full description of how that link works and all that in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And remember that we are powered by CodeRabbit. They give you the power of AI code reviews, help cut your code review time in half. And you can go and check them out. Mike, you did not put the CodeRabbit thing in here.
Because we're technically not powered by CodeRabbit.
Oh, we're not anymore.
Darn it. Yeah, but we can give it to them because this episode actually is very relevant to CodeRabbit regardless. And I'll be talking a little bit about AI reviewers throughout the episode. So whatever, let's leave it in.
Build tall, boys, not wide. But remember that half the floors in that skyscraper are going to be corrupt, incorrect, and incomplete. Man. Oh, man.
Good start to the episode.
Good start to a prepared episode.
High energy.
To be fair, we prepared the content, not the intro. To be fair.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. But okay, no, I think that's good. I think we can jump right in here. This is one of those episodes where I went back and I'm like, what am I doing more of lately? Like what are the things that I can talk about that I have a lot of expertise in because I've just been doing it a lot. And I took a look at our episodes lists, and we haven't done a code review episode since 2020. So it's been a little bit. It's been 5 years. Yeah, it's been 5 years. Almost, at least 5 years. And I was also surprised, Matt. I thought for sure we had done some sort of code review episode. It might have been like a small topic in a certain episode. I'm sure we talked about code reviews.
We do have a couple listicle episodes, right?
Exactly, yeah. But overall, this episode is, again, hyper-focused tall, not wide on code reviews. And the reason that it's really relevant right now, the reason for this title is that with AI, and I know people might be tired about hearing about this, but this is the reality. With AI, I've felt that I've been doing a lot more reviewing than coding. And I think that the reviewing skill is actually quite difficult to get right, especially at the scale that we're having to review right now. In certain ways, it's actually impossible to perfect, in my opinion. That's the other realization that I'm having. I'm not going to be talking too much about the impossibility here because there's probably going to be something in the future where it's going to help us review a little bit better. There's plenty of review tools. CodeRabbit's one of them. It's great. But I do have some issues with just letting AI review AI, right? AI is great at, I think, reviewing human written code and giving you like pointers on where to look. I think there has to be some other step for reviewing AI. And that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. But this episode really is about how to be a better reviewer in general. Okay, so how to review code in general, how to be better. And I think it's super relevant due to, again, how much people are going to have to review code, just period. There's going to be a ton of reviewing that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to get comfortable with it. And this is probably something that I was lacking in skills prior to 2024 or 2025 even. Like 2025 is really when I started to get better and better and better at it. I started to really go deep into how to review, try different methods, and then eventually found some that I like and that have worked pretty well for our systems. Our systems are very robust. We have a lot of lines of code, a lot of things like, interconnected and touch each other. We have a big monorepo that we're working on. So I've had to be pretty careful with reviewing, especially from a couple different like angles, a couple of different critical parts of the code base. And so that was the necessitated me to become better and better at it.
Can I actually ask a question? Because I immediately have a question, and I feel like some listeners are going to immediately have a question. You're talking about, early 2025. You've been coding at that point for quite a long time. What level of developer should be, I don't know if I want to say be listening to this episode or should be preparing as a code reviewer? The reason being is because, like, just myself, we've been going through on this podcast. I've been, kind of ripping through React, learning a little bit of React. And I'm just at the point where I'm starting to be able to read it. So if you gave me, for example, like a large example, obviously it's too early, but I'm just reading that. I'm not going to be like critical really about things. Maybe really blatantly wrong programming things I could point out because I have been coding for a while, but I wouldn't be able to come to you, for example, in a professional sense and say, Mike, I think that you're calling, this method, or you're using this React thing too much, or this is bad for performance or whatever. So what level of developer, I guess, needs to start doing this? Is this something that like the senior developer should be really worrying about? Is this something you should be starting right away?
No, this is a great question. In my opinion, again, right now, I think everyone is going to have to start getting comfortable with it. Regardless of your seniority, even if you're just getting into the industry, I think you need to jump into learning how to review better almost immediately. Reading code and learning about code is going to be a really, really important. Again, with AI, and people are going to be using AI more and more often to write their code, you're going to have to learn how to skim through and make sure that it makes sense and make sure that it follows what you want it to do and stuff like that. So maybe like a few years ago, I would have said, hey, you don't really have to learn how to deeply review something until you're, a mid-level developer. Maybe even then I would argue that learning how to review as soon as you get onto a job is key. For me personally, the reason I wasn't that great was because I always worked at startups. I was always like, really small teams, usually working on isolated feature sets. So like we're working on one app, another developer would working on another app. We would sometimes review each other's code for like general, practice, but overall we didn't have enough context to really do a good review. Okay. So because I was working with the smaller teams, smaller startups, more isolated, my review skills were just not that good. As I started to become more senior and as I started to build out a team and we were working on a similar, like in the same monorepo, on the same projects, it became a necessity for me to be able to make sure that we're not, leaking information. We're not causing forever like while loops and stuff like that, like a looping code, use effects, all that crap. It started to become more of a necessity for me to get better. And when you're a developer that maybe just starts a job at a larger, FANG company or a larger tech company with a larger team, you might be required to review code a lot faster than I was, for example. right? So in my opinion, right now, everyone should probably be learning how to review code. And even you, Matt, like when you're, again, learning about React, a lot of that is kind of reviewing code that the AI writes for you to understand it, then trying to write it yourself. But learning how to read what the AI generates for you is part of that process.
That's really interesting because
Right,
I was actually going to say I'm solo learning. So how would I have anything that gives me code to review? And my mind immediately went to, like, am I going to have to start getting into the open source game, which is not a problem so much as it is a logistical problem for me because we got lots of contracts on the go right now. But you're right. Like I have an entity, artificial as it is, generating code for me that I have to read and review.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's where everything has changed, in my opinion. And again, as it gets better, we're going to be coding less and reviewing more, and it's just going to be something that we need to build the skill up. I have some stats here just because I've been noticing myself and others where there's certain reviews that have been efficient for me and there's certain reviews that haven't. And so I wanted to start this episode with a little bit of stats on what reviews should look like. A lot of times we see like people, on Twitter or X or whatever you call it, put funny little snippets of like 10,000 lines in a single pull request. That's not good, obviously. And the reality is that it's so not good that that's pretty much useless. Like no one's going to review 10,000 lines. Almost certainly, if there's a vulnerability or an issue in there, it's going to go past the review because from a efficiency perspective, and this has been proven, a reviewer really is highly efficient in the 200 to 400 lines of code per change. Now they like as it goes higher, the efficiency drops. Obviously, it's not zero at like 1,000 lines, but at 10,000 lines, you're getting to the point where the return is almost zero at that point. So you want to keep your reviews to a very limited amount. Now we can't do that all the time because whoever is creating the feature create more. But what you can do is you could keep your focus on that amount of lines. So, and you can find the critical areas where you need to review and the areas where you can kind of skim. And it's it's not ideal because there could be serious issues on the skimmable areas, but that's where our limitations kind of dictate the approach. Like if we can't do it efficiently, then you can't do it. So you have to pick your poison and only review a small amount efficiently and make sure that, all the basic stuff passes and move along with your time. That's the reality of a code review. And a typical time frame for a code review, similar to like a focus event, 200, 400 lines of code, it shouldn't take you more than 25, 30 minutes. And then as you're approaching an hour, you're really starting to see a huge drop off. So those are the kinds of like constraints that I want to put on you when I'm talking about tips, because a lot of people will be like, well, how do I review 10,000 lines of code? You don't. That's the answer to that question. You can't review 10,000 lines of code. It's not like in a timely efficient way, right? Like unless it's your full-time job to only review that one pull request for a couple weeks. Okay, maybe there's some validation there, but like that just seems like it's not an efficient way to work, if that makes sense. So like you need to pick your battles, pick the ways that you can review it, and then also push back. If you get a 10,000 code review, like lines of code reviewed, either everyone has to review it together, right? Like you have a whole bug bash session where everyone goes through and you each assign chunks of code to the whole team, like 10 people, 20 people, whatever the team size is. Maybe that's a way to do it. Or you ask them to, hey, can you go back and take out some changes and then have a cascading review so that like you push in one review with small amount of changes and then base the next change set on the next review. And like you kind of cascade those 10,000 lines in with 1,000 line chunks or something like that.
I can actually give you an example of this. Not that I have insights into this is the particular cause, but a number of years ago, I was working on a client site where they were working on replacing their WordPress site. And we were brought in just to kind of keep their existing site working, kind of band-aiding things together quite almost literally in order to keep that site running. Big corporation, decisions take a long time. That's the reason. And they had, of course, a localization plugin. And we started having these issues where we in WordPress had to selectively update certain plugins. The site was just too old and too complex and had too many plugins. And so when we went to go update everything, nothing would work. So, okay, we're going to selectively update based on security problems that affect us, things like that. Again, we're band-aiding this together. and this localization plugin had to be updated due to a security problem. So we went to go update it. And thankfully we did this in staging. It took everything down on the homepage. For whatever reason, all the other pages work, but the homepage would keep looping. So I went into their, I think it was an email, but anyway, their support system, and I messaged them. And I said, hey, we're having this issue. And they said, hey, we have no reports of this. Our everything's fine. So I went, okay, let me do a little more digging. And I went into their change log, which is public. And their change log was something to the effect that they had completely changed their entire code base. And it said something like, we've literally changed every single line. And this echoes this situation to me, where I would imagine, because this is a huge localization plugin, it's more than 200 to 400 lines, as Mike said in his statistics there. So immediately it's like, okay, well, this is probably not been properly peer reviewed, let alone why did we rewrite this thing when you guys have been in business for however many years? And I understand maybe there was something behind the scenes. I don't have insights into that, but I ended up having to bring that up to them. And I said, I kind of want an investigation done here, because you guys can't just say that we rewrote the whole plugin, it's all new, and that it's going to run perfectly the way it was. And what ended up happening was there was a glitch or a bug with old templates where it wasn't using the WordPress permalink system, blah, blah, blah. That's not, important for it today. And the next patch, which was a little quick, almost like a hot fix, really, that was a couple of kilobytes, ended up fixing the issue. And that's an example, right? Where it's like, okay, how many people on an older template that couldn't be updated, because I'm sure there's tons of WordPress sites that have these issues like this, how many were affected by that? And that's just one example of, you can imagine, like Miley, you already mentioned that in the code base that you're working in right now, a lot of things are interlinked and, it's kind of a web. Imagine trying to accommodate that, where you just say, okay, that's it. It's almost February. So starting February 1st, we're rewriting everything. And then we're going to basically pick up the house and slam it back down on new foundations. And it'll work perfect. Don't worry. I mean, that's just not going to take hold, and it's not likely going to be very well reviewed either, because it probably can't be.
That's exactly it. Like the sacrifice is that if you push too much in, it's not going to be reviewed. That's the sacrifice. And I've made that call several times. Like I've when someone's breathing down your neck for a deadline, sometimes you have to push in a 5,000 line review, and you have to push it through. Like, just be like, hey, just check these files. I've done that before. Like, hey, just check these 3 files. They're the most important ones. And then, trust the rest. And what are you left to do? You trust the rest, and something breaks. Stuff has broken.
Of course.
Sometimes it hasn't. Sometimes it hasn't. Sometimes it has. So like, it's one of those give and take, one of those things, a balancing act for the most part. But if you can figure out a pattern, and if you can figure out a path and that appeases both the, velocity of a team and the reliability of a code base, this is always going to be like not a perfect balance. You're going to have to sacrifice here and there. You're going to have a better time. So, you're not going to be spending 3 hours every time reviewing, and then you're also not going to be pushing bad code. So that's the challenge. You're going to have to play around with it. And I have some tips on how you can become better at code reviewing and make your team better at code reviewing as well. To jump right in here, the first tip, and probably the most important, honestly, I'm not going to bury the lead with this one, is figure out what the most critical parts of a code base are you are reviewing. And this is usually typically a list, right? A list of the prioritizations of what the code base is doing. So for example, I'll give an example of the list that I work with. At the top of my list is access control. So this means like who can access what element of the application. So when it's deployed, can a user access an admin privileged area? Can a user access a different user's private data, right? Like those are the things that I put at the very top of my list, right? That's the most important thing to me. So that's when I start reviewing, that's the first thing I check through, is making sure that there are no access control leaks. There are no data leaks, because if there is any of that in my review, that's the thing that can bury the entire app. And depending on what you're building, this might be super important for you, and probably is, or it might not. You could be building something that really doesn't need access control because it's a fully public facing application, but it needs to be super, super reliable or super, super good UI UX. So that might be at the top of your list. right? So you need to decide and make a list literally of what the most important parts of this code base are. And again, like for me, it's access control. The next part is security, which is kind of like access control, but it's more about like, can they break into your password? Like, can they crack a encryption or something like that?
It's almost like
Then,
I would say, like, between the two, just to give an example, is like access control. These are really simple examples. Access control is sort of like, can somebody who is not logged in see the logout button in its simplest form? Security would be like, can somebody who is not that person see the address that they've entered into their profile?
yeah, similar. Yeah, exactly. I think that makes sense. I think that makes
Like,
sense.
you only
So
want the
something like
person that entered in their own address to see their own
Yeah.
address. You don't want, like, Mike, I don't want you to see my address and I shouldn't see your address as two separate users on the system. That's more security, and access control plays in there, but just two simple
Yeah.
examples.
Another example for security as well is like, I don't want people to be able to run scripts in my text box.
Yes,
Just like,
yeah.
wipe my database, stuff like that. That would be security to me.
Storing data is
trying
a
to think
certain
about
way,
it.
I'm sure, in databases,
Yeah, like
encrypting and all that.
exactly. Those are the security things. So that's the second part of my list, making sure that the app is secure from the changes that are being made. The third part is speed, because we've had a lot of complaints about speed. So I'm making sure that people don't put in unnecessary wait times. I'm making sure that people don't put in like a crazy amount of effects that will cause re-renders on the page and stuff like that. So that's important for us. Fourth one is testing and reliability. So I put these together because if without testing, you can't really have good reliability. So I'm making sure that critical components that are being added in a PR are being tested properly and therefore are made reliable. The fourth one and kind of the last one on our end is UI UX. Super important and still part of the list. There's plenty of things that aren't on the list, by the way. Like, for example, code formatting, not even on the list, right? Like, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's not on the list. Like syntax naming, or like naming of variables, not on the list, right? Like I'll intentionally leave stuff off of this list because I only have so much time to review. So I need to focus on the top priority things. And this is what I've decided are the top priority things in a review. If I fly by, see something that fits outside the list, but is egregiously, bad, I'll obviously comment on it. But for the most part, I'll ignore it.
Well, this is a prime example of prioritizing in a way, prioritizing like in an objective way for your web app, because I can already think of a couple of clients that I work for that are all their stuff, their website, their web app, everything is all public facing. And so the information is not hiding, like nothing's hiding. And sometimes they're the sole account. They're the sole person that logs into the CMS. So they probably don't even care that their password got compromised because it's a unique password. They'll just go like, oh, let me just fix that. So what goes up on the list is UI UX likely, but really probably market imaging. Like if you choose the wrong color for the nav bar, us as people who understand web development think it's no big deal. But to a marketer, this is the wrong message. This is a really serious issue. Why is this blue? That's our other brand. This needs to be changed. This is really serious. And it is to them, right? Because maybe all of their messaging, they have through multiple brands, and all their messaging in their marketing campaigns, their print, their this, their that, the other thing. It's blue if it's this type of messaging. It's red if it's this other type of messaging. And so you have to get that right. So basically, they're okay with having things be a little chaotic and swept behind the curtain or under the rug, if you will, because they want that rug or that curtain to be really pristine and nice. Now, obviously, within reason, you can't be just, I don't want my client's CMS account to be compromised. I'm not just going to be like, whatever, let's do JavaScript, just JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript authentication. We're not going to do that, where you can just see the password in the plain source in the dev tools of the browser. But you can see how the priorities can absolutely shift depending on what it is you're doing.
100%. Yeah. And it's important for you to sit down and think about it clearly and make this list for yourself, because what this turns into is essentially a checklist for each and every review that you do. And how I typically do it is first you get an idea of what the changes are in their PR review, either through a description that was written or through AI that's summarizing or through just a quick scan of the code that was changed. That's the first kind of pass that I do. And then I go through my checklist and go through a pass looking at access control. And I can usually see, because to be a good reviewer, you have to have good context in the code that you're reviewing. So if I wrote a lot of the code, I'm a good reviewer of that code. I can go in and see what files have been changed and know where access control is going to be relevant. And I'll go through and I'll look at the files that have been changed that has relevancy and access control, and I'll check that off. Okay, usually pretty quick. Then I'll do the same thing for security. Sometimes I'll bundle access control and security because, again, they're pretty tightly knit. Sometimes I won't, depending on the size of the review. Then I'll go through and check for speed. Again, another pass. I'll go through, again, look at the files that have been changed, see where speed could be affected, go through those, focus on just speed, and do that. Same thing with testing and reliability, same thing with UI UX. So I'll do several passes, like, at least 3 passes every single review that I do. But I'm not reviewing all the code every pass. I'm reviewing chunks of code every time. And a lot of times, if the code changes are too big, which happens, I might not even review some files, which is bad. But that's the reality of when you have that balancing act of like, there's too much going on, right? Like there's just too much to change.
Move fast and break
The only
things,
thing I'll do
essentially.
is, I'll quickly skim them to make sure that no one's like injecting malicious code. But we're all a tight-knit team, so I can trust like the security of that stuff. So there are certain things that fall through the cracks with this method, but because I am able to efficiently and quickly do it, I'm not losing a lot of time, and I am a pretty efficient reviewer in that case. So for these kinds of like high level things, I'm usually can catch them pretty easily at this point. And so it's just become kind of a well-oiled machine over time because I've been able to practice so much, and the team is doing a very similar thing across the board. So our code reliability is very high because of that. Yes, we still get some things to slip through the cracks. It's going to happen. You have to, you can't be 100%. Even if you are trying to 100% everything, stuff's still going to slip through the cracks. I guarantee it. And I would argue that if you're trying to 100% everything, you're probably going to do worse on most things. And so hyper-focusing, in my opinion, on the most important stuff is going to lead to a better code base in general. Next tip I have here is leave nits and formatting to proper tools, to Prettier and Lint. And now with AI, leave the nits to the AI. I think if we look at the 2020 episode, we talked about nits in that episode, I'm pretty sure. And I said the same thing where I don't leave nits. I don't leave nits. If I see a pattern, and let me clarify what a nit is. A nit is like, hey, you didn't put a space here when there should be a space. You didn't, leave a line under the function because that's part of the standards of our code base. You didn't leave a line. You need to leave a line. Like small things that don't really affect performance, security, don't affect any of the things that I'm talking about above, right? But affect like code readability maybe or something like that. Very low hanging, like not super important things.
It's almost like preference over function. It's you decided on preference or preferential.
That's exactly it. So having tools do the nits for you, Prettier and ESLint handle 95%, because if you have a good setup, and I spend a lot of time setting those up, most of these will go away anyway. People can write code however they want, and the formatter will format it the same way for everyone, which is great. The other 5%, AI handles pretty well. As long as you feed it a good standards doc, be like, hey, this is the standards of our code base. Go ahead, CodeRabbit, review it. And with that in mind, it'll usually catch any nit, like, hey, you named this variable incorrectly. Those are perfect nits for AI to find, because like, hey, we use underscores, you use camel case. I mean, ESLint can actually do that too, but if you didn't set it up, then AI will find it for you, no problem. And yeah, I feel like the nits actually come out better from an AI than a human, because from a human perspective, it just looks like you're being pedantic. Like you're just you're just leaving comments for the sake of leaving comments. A lot of times, if I get a lot of nits on a review, like that's usually how I see it, and a lot of people will see it. But from an AI, it's like, oh, it's just being a machine, and it's like reviewing the code. So that's another advantage of just leaving the nits to other things. When unclear about any design decision, any aspect of the code, that's a good indicator for you to ask a question, right? If you have too many of those questions, that's a good indication that there's something going on. That's a code smell, in my opinion. A code smell is when you don't know what's wrong, but you can see that there's something wrong. And so like, trust your gut. When you have a lot of questions, ask those questions. It's really important, because you'll get a clarification and it'll make sense. And sometimes the person will look at the question and be like, oh, the question will prompt them to redo something because it's not clear, right? Whether it be like, hey, like, oh, shoot, I wrote this function incorrectly, so it actually looks like I'm not doing this, but I am doing this, whatever.
Well, I can imagine like already, especially when things are interlinked, that one of the code smells would be like, hey, why aren't you, let's just say, connecting to the screen API to see if the screen is locked or not? And then you might, that clarification could be justified in that either A, the person did forget, and so your code review question is justified, or it could be justified in the direction of the coder if they say, actually, that API is coming up for a change in the latest Android update or whatever, and it's going to reflect the always on display, and we don't quite know where it's going to go. And so for longevity, sustainability of the code, whatever you want to say, I'm going to generate my own variable based on the battery power or whatever. And so it's like, okay, this is kind of code smelly, but there's a justification here because there's a change coming down the pipe in the Android land if that's what we're targeting.
That's absolutely the case. And like you can't as a reviewer because you're not inside the person's head. So it's a good time to ask a question. And the other thing that I've noticed again is that people kind of like questions because it shows that you're interested in what they're doing and they're more than willing to answer them versus like you being critical of their code. Like you have to be critical of their code in a PR review. That's part of the PR review and that's okay. And you need to do that when you see something that's wrong. But when you're asking a question, it comes off better as well. Next thing here is time box and kind of leave time, dedicated time for reviews. So don't mix reviews in with coding. Context switching is difficult. I've talked about this a lot. For me particularly, I don't know why, but I have a really hard time like switching focus. And because of that, I typically tend to do PR reviews either first thing in the morning, right after lunch, or right before I log off. So I have like 3 dedicated times. I don't review all like in those 3 dedicated times, but depending on the day, I'll choose one of those times to do the reviews. Depending on if I'm blocking someone, if like the review is coming later on the day, like whatever. And I'll stick to that and I'll set aside the time. I'll kind of stop coding for 5 minutes, 10 minutes beforehand, and I'll switch to review mode because it's just a different mindset, right? Like it's a completely different mindset. You need to get into it and you need to stay in it. And the time box part of it is that you don't want to review for 3 hours straight because of the statistics that I talked about at the start of the episode. Your efficiency drops considerably after like the first 30 to 45 minutes. So typically I only set aside a maximum of an hour to do reviews. And if I can do a couple reviews in that hour, great. If I can't, I'll punt it till either later in the day or the next day or whatever. Most of the time with the team that we have, I can do one hour reviews a day at most and get by. So it's not a big deal. Everyone's reviewing each other's code. So I'm not constantly reviewing everyone's code. And so that helps. But that's the idea is like, you don't want to have like one engineer reviewing everyone's code because what's going to happen in that scenario is it's either going to be a bottleneck, a severe bottleneck, where they're going to have to schedule it out, or they're going to just rubber stamp it. The reviews stop losing their reason.
I was actually going to ask you a question here. I was going to ask it when you said, you're creating your checklist and then you go and you do your multiple passes. So maybe you check for speed the first time, security the second time, whatever your particular tailored order is. I was going to ask if you take time off, or specifically, do you like sleep on it? So I'll just give an example. So if I write a blog post, which I do for HTML, all the things, I'll write up a guide almost all the time. That draft will sit in the system and I will be like, okay, say it's Monday, finish the draft. I'm happy with it. I've even proofread it. It sits in a draft state in the CMS. I literally sleep on it. And then the next day I reread it again. And then usually it's okay, or I make some minor changes and then I ship it. So I literally sleep on it. Obviously you're, moving fast and breaking things. So that's not always going to be possible, but like, is that a consideration because of the context switch? Because if you're all up in how GIFs work, you're in there and you're messing around with syncing up GIFs or something, I don't know, whatever you're trying to do. And then you get pulled into, hey, does this work based on the screen status of, on and off? It's like, uh-oh. It's like a totally different context, as you mentioned, and it's a totally different, I don't want to say totally different technology, but it kind of is, at least at the micro level, right? The zoomed in level.
No, it's a really good question. And I'll be honest, for the most part, no. For the most part, I finish a review and it's done and it's out of my head. Because like, again, I am doing so much. Reviews is just part of my job.
Okay.
A small part. So I can't leave it in my head. Now, that does change depending on the severity and the size of the review. There's some reviews where like we'll leave it up for a week if it's a really big migration, and we'll have multiple people review it. And then, yes, in that case, yeah, it is kind of like I review it and then I sleep on it. And sometimes I'll come up with something that I need to look at or I forget or something like that. So it does happen, but it's rare. For the most part, it's very much ethereal where like I'll review it and then it's gone out of my head and I don't think about it. I don't sleep on it. It's just approved.
Okay.
Because I don't, again, it's the balancing act of being the bottleneck, right? Like if I did that for every review, our velocity would slow down greatly. And yes, I might catch some extra things. That's for sure the case. But the reality is that the amount I'll catch versus the velocity drop won't be worth it.
Okay. Because I guess with that, then let me ask you this. So I don't know if we want to wait to the next section, actually. I was going to, but let me ask a question now. Maybe we'll push it. But we have people writing code with AI and manually, sort of like a machine person relationship, right? In various degrees of that ratio, whether it's mostly machine writing it, whether it's mostly human writing it. How do you, as the person on the other side of the fence, push that? So, like, for example, let's just say you ask me to make a slider, something simple, right? Something that we all recognize. Make a slider, make it animate a certain way, whatever. And it's fairly complex-ish, but everyone's familiar with it. So I make it, but I make it mostly with AI. This whole process, like, how does this get affected? Because, like, I'm the person that coded it, quote unquote. 90% of it was actually written by an AI. Now I'm code reviewing, but it's kind of an informal code review from the AI. I then, okay, looks good to me, test it a little bit, whatever. Put it into the code, put in the pull request to get it pulled into the main repo or the whatever we're working on. And then you get assigned, let's say, Mike, as the code reviewer, like the formal code reviewer, and you have questions of me. Do I even really know what's going on? Because I feel like what we've been discussing a lot is like a very like human wrote code, now human look at code in a simple way. But how does it upset that? The reason why I mention this now is because we're talking about, potentially taking breaks or the context switching and things. This is where that sort of like dumping of knowledge, because the AI is dumping knowledge on me as the coder, and then I'm like quickly reviewing it, and I'm dumping it into my little test bed staging, whatever the heck it is, testing it out. Then I'm jumping it into the PR, you know what I mean? And then I'm dumping it in your lab. So how does that change that situation? I don't know if that's a properly phrased question, but it's something that's been kind of bugging me throughout the episode.
I mean, no, it's a very good question, and it's something that's it's becoming one of the biggest challenges in the AI coding era.
Fair enough.
Because the level of context that you have on a code base that you haven't written starts to drop the more you use AI, right? Like the more AI writes the code, the lower the amount of information you have about that code base. You're right that in some cases, like if one of the, engineers uses AI and I ask a question, they can't answer it. And that's a red flag for the most part. That's not good. Like we need to go back and be like, hey, can you please look into this further and make sure that you can answer this? But the reality is that you can just ask AI. The same AI that wrote it will probably be able to answer whatever question, like PR question you have about that. Whether it is able to answer it 100% correctly is the question. And as a reviewer, you might believe its answer more often than not, and therefore just rubber stamp it because you just have to trust, just like you would trust a engineer, you would have to trust the AI. And the AI can be wrong, the engineer can be wrong. So I don't know. Overall, I think this does lower reliability of a code base. The reality is that if we look at it from like a AI kind of acts like a human, it's almost the same because an engineer, like you can ask the same question to someone that wrote that code from scratch and they should know everything, but they could get that wrong too.
Or forget if it's been
Like
days, right?
Or forget, or yeah, whatever. Like it's kind of the same thing. Only time will tell how it will impact longevity of systems, like how hard it'll be to maintain a big system that was written mostly by AI or assisted AI coding. It is a very significant concern of mine because I'm noticing myself fall into the trap of using AI for the most part to code and then reviewing the code and losing context. Like I'll lose context of how it was written, and I will sometimes have to go in and ask the AI to remind me like why it did this. And a lot of times in our design and architecture meetings, the engineers all have to do the same thing. We're like, hey, why did we do it this way? And they're like, Claude told me. let me go ask Claude, and they'll ask Claude, and Claude will respond.
That's
and they'll
actually
be
what
like,
gets
"Oh, this
said
is
in the
why."
meeting. Like that
That's
will
absolutely
actually,
what gets
we're
said.
not trying to
Yes,
like
verbatim,
shame
yeah.
the AI usage where it's like, well, I'm not
No.
sure. I'll have to check. And then you're like
Well,
stealthily typing into Claude, like,
no,
how
no,
did
no,
this
no,
work?
no, 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 no. That would be ridiculous. No, in the meeting it's said, like, if you don't know it because Claude wrote it, you say that Claude wrote it, and you go in and ask Claude, and then as a group we discuss the response, and sometimes the response would be like bullshit. You're like, well, why? Like the response that Claude gives is like, oh, because of X, Y, and Z, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense to the relevance of this project, so we didn't review it correctly. So I'll push back and be like, well, tell Claude this, or like redo it this way because it doesn't make sense in the project. So in some situations, as a group, you can come together and it makes it a little bit easier. But a lot of times, stuff will fall through the cracks because of that, like decisions that were being made by Claude that aren't being properly reviewed. And so, yeah, it's something that I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but it's something that's definitely on top of mind for me, is how to maintain the code that is mostly written by AI that has less and less context. Like the engineers have less and less context in, because that's what's happening.
You know what's interesting actually is this is very reminiscent at a very high level of sort of WordPress, let's say 10 years ago through maybe even 5 years ago. It's kind of a rough range of time. Right now, WordPress in general is really, really stable. I even see people talk about this on social media. And some website owners or even developers will turn automatic updates on. And that to me is like, whoa, like, specifically for the plugins, the plugin auto updates. It's like, whoa, like, I don't know. Cause I'm from that era where a lot of it's abstracted. It's not abstracted by AI, but I don't know what Elementor is doing to the CSS. I don't know what ACF is doing behind the scenes to the information that I have in my custom fields. I don't know what WordPress, if I do like a full version update, I don't know what WordPress is changing in relation to how I have my stuff, even maybe not even technically laid out, but maybe it's not touching the technical part, but maybe it's changing how I have things organized. And it's like, that's a lot of abstraction, but we've worked, kind of with WordPress, not just us, the community has worked with WordPress for years and years and years and years and years. And it's kind of like we're working toward I don't know if you want to call it a line of best fit, or we're working toward sort of like a stability line where it's like now nice and stable and it just kind of micro adjusts up and down, but it's mostly straight, mostly flat. It's just interesting that I feel like coding is in that initial, like very wavy, and we're like with AI coding, it's like very wavy, and we're trying to, isn't that DSP or something? I forget. We did this in college where it's like you have this wave and we're trying to like correct it. So there's like, it goes way up, way down, but every time it goes up and down, we correct it. A little less of a peak, little less of an underneath, little less of an up, little less of a down, and eventually comes to a rest at like sort of a flat line. And I feel like WordPress is like kind of near that, the flat-ish period, right? Where there's going to be some upsets, I'm sure, but it's generally rather stable. I feel like AI is like in that peak or like way in that dip, right? Where it's still getting figured out, and who knows what's going to happen.
That's absolutely the case. And like, it's tough to overcorrect and undercorrect. Like we're at the point where you kind of have to embrace the tools, but with it, you'll have to embrace the fluctuation and the instability that comes with it, right? Like it's either you accept the fact that the AI code might not be as heavily understood by your engineers, and therefore there could be some reliability issues and some maintenance issues, but you gain the velocity of using AI to write the code, right? So you have to balance that. Or you go the other direction of being like, okay, well, we need this to be as reliable as possible, and everyone needs to know everything about it. And you disable the AI and have everyone just write it manually and have the most amount of contextual knowledge on the code base. But then you lose a lot of the velocity and a lot of the advantages of AI. So you have to pick one and you have to stick with it, and you have to understand the balances, right? You can't be like, oh, we're just going to use AI and everything's going to be great. That's not the case. Like, with any new tool, there's going to be some instability. There's going to be some concerns. And as long as you're willing to accept that, then it could be a great tool. But if you're not, if your system requires, again, 100% uptime, we've talked about this many times, you have to go back to a different period of time when writing code was very simple. Like, I wouldn't use any packages. I wouldn't use it. Like, I would just write all the code yourself and manually, line by line, making sure that you understand everything and everything runs perfectly and is tested well, like, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still some, like, definitely some fluctuation there and a lot of stuff to figure out. that we're trying to figure out kind of as we're building the ship of Theseus in air, just because it's crazy. It's also scary and it's also great all at the same time. Weird.
Because we're talking very much about how the reviews are being done by humans and like the code's being kind of, written in varying ratios by AI. But also, I mean, you can have an AI do the reviewing as well. Like we've talked about CodeRabbit, of course, but we have other solutions as well. Like you could even just go into ChatGPT and be like, "Yo, give me a code review." Like AI can code review, and that's another kind of abstraction. It's another kind of a black box of like, what is this? Like, what's it actually reviewing?
So, and let's get right into that. Right before, I want to have one final point on tips for the code reviewer, because for some reason this isn't mentioned, and I don't like anywhere that I've seen. Run the code. It seems like
see if it works.
clone it. Yeah, like literally see if it works. I've caught the most, the most things while running code in a PR. Now this could be a pain in the ass depending on what you're reviewing. So I understand that sometimes you just trust the tests or something, like at least run the tests, I guess. But like, I would highly recommend you to spend a little bit of time setting up the environment to run the code. Sometimes it's a small thing that you have to test. Sometimes it's a more complicated thing. Have the author tell you the steps to reproduce whatever, like how to test manually. But running the code I've caught so many things running the code, because when someone's developing something, they're testing it one way, sometimes like super efficiently using like console logs and everything, but they're not testing it the way a different person would test, and therefore they might miss something. Easy catches have been found there, like super easy catches.
If you're like a gamer, you notice where it's like, wait, why is this main menu slightly broken? How did they miss this? And it's probably because of this. Because they would have to I mean, imagine, I'm not a game dev, but I would imagine you'd have to compile the whole game to like run a build somewhere, and it's like, oh, like they just trusted that all the menu options were selectable because of a test that was like, yeah, it focuses on the options or whatever.
Correct. That is exactly correct. So yeah, run the code, please. I'm gonna help you a lot, I guarantee it. So to get into the final segment here, which is how AI can help, I have a couple things. So one thing you mentioned, Matt, you brought up is like AI can do their code review. And I think that's super important to understand and to use, but it should be like a first step. So even before you create a PR, or even before you assign a reviewer to a pull request, the author of the pull request should run some sort of review, whether it be GitHub Copilot, CodeRabbit, Cursor, BugBot, whatever. Like there's a million of them now. Claude can do a code review. Every AI agent can do a code review. I don't have to name them all. Run the AI code review, go through, mitigate whatever it finds, and then open up your pull request for a review, right? Like, so this is the AI reviewer should be a step before the review gets to be put into a human's hands, to eliminate any low-hanging bugs and to make the human's review faster, because there's less bugs. Therefore, there's less things to look at. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think. Yeah. So that's where I stand at an AI reviewer. It's not something that a reviewer should use. So the reviewer shouldn't be initiating an AI code review from like CodeRabbit. That's something the author should be initiating and then solving and then starting the review.
It's more like a filter, like just a quick
Correct.
Yeah. Like a sanity check.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess, almost in a way.
That's exactly it. Because a lot of times, at least in my experience, CodeRabbit's actually pretty good. But lately with GitHub Copilot, we've been using, because like my company doesn't have a CodeRabbit subscription. We have a GitHub Copilot subscription. It's been going down rabbit holes. It's been doing some really weird things. It's been knitting nonsense. So I can't trust it fully. Like, no, I don't think anyone can. There might be better ones. Again, I haven't used Claude Reviewer, so that might be a really good one. I don't know. But overall, even if it's amazing, I would still do a human review. And that's what I'm going to talk about as well, is like, you could still use AI to help you review something.
As the human reviewer.
As the human reviewer, yes. Correct. So AI does a really good job at summarizing. So it can tell you what's changed in a diff, right? And in human readable language. So without you having to read every line of code, you can understand what's been changed. So that'll give you a direction of what you need to look at, right? AI, you can use AI to like highlight some code that's been changed and ask it, hey, can you find some, like, specifically for this code, any issues here? Or test your theories, be like, hey, I think there's something off here. I think there's a code smell. Can you look at the code base and the code to see if there's if my thought is correct, right? Like you can ask it, you can use it as like a peer reviewer rather than a full like AI review. And it's pretty good at doing those kinds of things. Like I've been testing that out myself. I built even a little open source tool that will just allow me to essentially chat to the review, to the pull request that's been open, and as well as propagate like, the things that could be wrong, the critical vulnerabilities that could potentially be implemented in a review in an issue like this, right? Like, or in a pull request like this. So it'll look and be like, there could be access control issues because of A, B, and C, and then I'll know where to look for access control issues. So it can assist you in a review, but I want to be very clear that you're still the one in control and you need to be the one that signs off on correctness, the trade-offs, and like where it fits in the system. And that's really it.
Is this, I'll just like ask a little send-off question. Is this at all concerning that AI is touching everything, including the thing that we kind of hard set as humans should be reviewing this? Like it's like the coder is coding it up with the assistance of AI, then they use an AI reviewer to help them. That actually sounds like a good idea because it's like an initial filter or primary filter, whatever. And then it helps them catch some things so that you don't have the back and forth with the human code reviewer. So, okay, they're done that. They're happy with it. They put in the pull request, the PR, or they go and the company, whatever, assigns a human reviewer. And then now the human reviewer is using AI as well. Is that a concern at all from more of the human standpoint? Like, I'm sure we kind of covered a lot of the like technical things in this episode, but like to me, it's almost like, hey, is this AI pushing us out, pushing the humans out a little bit? Do you think?
I mean, yes.
It's a little bit,
it is.
A little bit crazy,
but
right?
It is like at the moment, at least, it's still a tool.
Sure.
And that's how like most people around think about it. It's a tool. So that's that's the intention of what I'm trying to say is like, it's just an assistant to you reviewing the code, to the human reviewing the code. From a philosophical perspective, yeah, it's pushing us out. Absolutely. Like it's whether it'll be able to do everything on its own, I don't know when that's going to happen because like the last 10% is always the hardest. And we might have hit a wall in that perspective, but I think inevitably it's going to get better, and inevitably becoming better will make it have less human input needed. We've talked about this like a lot on the podcast where like my belief is that like it's going to get better and it will impact the software developer industry. I don't know in what way quite yet and how rapidly, but like I've seen it, I've used it a lot now, and I've seen the progress being made over the last 2 years. Yeah, it's a different ballpark. We're playing in a different ballpark right now. Like it's a completely different. People are talking about this as a new phase of software development, and as a very rapidly different phase of it, not a replacement of software development. We're going to actually have a web news shortly on this that will probably actually be out before this episode airs. So you might have already listened to it, but essentially like software engineering still required, but it's different.
Sure. Yeah. I know that's like a larger conversation and we could blow the episode up by 50 minutes. I just wanted like a quick check-in, with the maybe we'll even do this occasionally. A quick check-in in the context of the episode, like code reviewing, how we feeling? But I think that's it. Like you said, right? That's the episode. Again, please give us your feedback. Building tall, not wide. If you are a strategy gamer, I don't know if that terminology is used outside of strategy video games. Basically, it means kind of hyper focusing and like having more information on like a one single point rather than being like, let's do a listicle with like 18 things and just be kind of shallow in each of them. So hopefully you liked it. And hopefully you adhere to that. But anyway, if you want to support episodes like this, remember that we're on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML, all the things. Check out the tiers and give that a go. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Tim from The Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com. Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server. And Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And we'd like to also give a shout out to Michael Araka, a contributing author on HTMLAllTheThings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughtTXG.com. And remember, you can net yourself up to 20% off a Scrimba Pro plan with our link, with details about that in the show notes on HTMLAllTheThings.com. Link will also be in the show description and in the show notes as well. And that is it. Feel free to leave a comment or review in the platform you're listening to this on, and we're signing off.